Paul, is this the restarting of the European programme? Is that what we've witnessed tonight?
I think that that's probably going a little bit too far. The anti-establishment movement in Europe is by no means over. The fundamental causes of anti-establishmentism are still there. And this will be a challenge that we have to face up to again and again, I think, in further elections. We have elections next weekend in Germany, North Rhine-Westphalia. We have then the French presidential election, parliamentary election. Then we have the German federal elections. Then we have the Italians. There is still plenty to keep Europe occupied, and that's before they start sitting down and talking across galaxies with the UK.
Paul, this question of redenomination risk has dominated European markets since 2011. It was driven by markets. It was driven by the bond vigilantes, and the ECB stepped in and solved that. Now it's driven by the electorate. That's why it keeps coming up again and again and again. And I just wonder, Paul, what levers the European Union, the leaders of these countries, can actually pull over the next several years to do something about it, to solve that issue in the same way the ECB did for the markets. What can these leaders do for the electorate?
Well, ultimately, the euro doesn't work as a monetary union. It's never worked as a monetary union. It needs to work better. It doesn't need to be perfect. Monetary unions generally aren't perfect. The US monetary union isn't perfect, but it needs to work better. You need to have a genuine banking union. That's one thing. It is ridiculous that if you write a cheque on a French bank, you cannot use it in Germany. This is absurd. It would be like writing a cheque in California and not being able to use it in New York. So we need to get a proper banking union. And I think there does need to be a degree of automation to the fiscal transfers. The fiscal transfers are there already. We just need to automate the process to take the political toxic sting out of it. With that, I think you can end up with a monetary union which is viable, at least not only economically viable, but politically viable.
Paul, before we get there, a lot of focus is placed on the European Union's Growth and Stability Pact, that effort to get debt to GDP down somewhere towards 60%, to get budget deficits as a percentage of GDP down somewhere towards 3%. Can they move things around for that, or are they doing that already, as we have seen, as they delay the targets again and again for many of these countries?
I mean, I think that's got to continue to be the case. I mean, that's frankly is part of the problem. The fiscal programme recognised that there was a free rider problem, that countries may be able to run excessive deficits and not be punished by the bond markets by being in the monetary union. But it clearly isn't something which is going to be honoured at a time of still considerable economic disturbance within Europe, and at a time when you need to reform, which creates more pain in the short term, which you need to try and mitigate somehow.
Paul, you have had such expertise for us over the years on Europe and the European Union. As Mr. Juncker looks at this view tonight at the Louvre, what does he think of? Mr. Juncker's been visible. He's been, some would say, impolite to the people of the United Kingdom. How will he adapt and adjust to the victory of Mr. Macron?
Well, I think this is an interesting issue now because, of course, what is happening in Europe with the UK's departure is the balance of power in Europe is shifting. It's in a state of flux. The British have traditionally backed the German view of economics, fiscal policy, free trade reform, and so on and so forth. And indeed, one could argue the British have played a leading role when it comes to international trade. Take the UK out of the equation, as you now must, and the balance of power, I think, perhaps tilts a little away from Berlin and maybe towards Paris. So the question now is, what sort of person is Macron going to be? Is he going to be in a cohabitation situation where he doesn't have control of the National Assembly, which changes the role of the president? Is he going to be focused entirely on the domestic agenda, or is he going to play a European role and perhaps take more of a lead than France has done in recent years? So this, I think, has got to be the question that the European Union as a whole is addressing. France can't just be seen in isolation. It's one of the leading powers in Europe, and without the UK there, France's role is perhaps enhanced.